Well, that's true. I've observed that in my yard cats. I have a lot of yard cats. I don't like live garbage in my house, so I don't throw anything that's going to smell bad in my garbage. I throw it in the backyard. If the cats, the birds, visiting dogs don't get it, it feeds the grass, and I don't have to deal with it. So I've observed a lot of cats and a lot of cat fights, male cat fights, Well, what I've seen with my own eyes, the strongest, baddest, toughest cat out there gets to have the most kittens. He may not live very long, but he gets to have most kittens. So survival of fittest it does not help the so-called evolution idea. It actually works against it. Because, once you have an established species, the strongest buffalo, they can run all the rest of the bulls off, the strongest horse, the strongest stud that can kick the hardest and get rid of the competition, they're the ones that are going to reproduce. It's like football players and cheerleaders. Who do the cheerleaders go with? It ain't the guy playing French horn. It's the football guy, right?
Oh, yeah.
Survival of the fittest.
Yeah, well, the opposite sex always goes for that, I mean, too bad for the computer nerd. What did I say, nude? Computer nerd, The guy who plays around with computers or whatever, or works on, cars and everything. Cars and sports guys, like football players and baseball players attract the women.
Well, for every guy, there's a girl that likes him and vice versa. And, in high school, we're kind of shallow. We don't know much, and there's popularity. We think we know what's popular. So the guy that plays clarinet in the band that's not very tall, he thinks he's a failure. When he gets off to college, he grows up a little bit. And sure enough, there are girls out there that are just really good looking that like somebody with a brain. And so we tend to marry those people that appreciate what we are. It doesn't matter. There's nothing wrong with being a football player or a clarinet player. They're both good. But it's sort of survival of the fittest, and those guys that can't play football go out and be a lot better accountant. They get to be a better artist. My two brothers and I left no discernible athletic record in our high school years, but we were first horn in the French horn section. We had first the lead in all the plays. We sold artwork and all that sort of stuff. So we found our little way too. It took a while. But I think it's the same way in the animal kingdom. Whatever there is, it's going to stay that way. It's not going to change. Now, like rabbits or something like that, if they move into a new area, the ones that can stand the most cold, they get to reproduce. The ones that don't like the cold, they go back south. So after a while, you get the ones that are the very same brothers and sisters, but the ones that were able to stand the cold are a little bigger. Their ears are a little bit different, a little thicker or something. And so they end up being the dominant species in the northern climes, whereas the other ones are in the southern climes. Same animals. There's no evolution there. There's just filtering out by virtue of the ecology. I think people do the same thing, Artists tend to end up in cities where people buy art. Farmers end up on the farm where people need crops. There's nothing wrong with either one of them. But it doesn't mean, I don't think it says evolution. I have not seen that. I've dug up a million bones. I don't see it. People can show me a little fragment of a mastodon tooth. I pretty well tell you where it goes in the tooth, and they're all the same. There's no there's no steps from this to that. They're all just different species. Anyway, that's my take on it.
Now, your feeling, what killed off the prehistoric animals? I mean, there's so many. First, they say asteroid hit the Earth. Then you got another group that says, the Earth, went into the climate change, in a deep freeze. And you hear all these other, stories from all these different scientists have different ideas how it happened. You're out there collecting bones and seeing how they were laid out in the ground. What do you think?
Okay, I've worked in the strata in a lot of the western and northern states. New York State, I've looked at the strata and collected there. Across the south in Texas, Nevada, New Mexico, Arizona, California, the Qumran Caves area in Israel, Peru. I looked at the strata over there, and I studied strata from all around the world. I worked on stuff from a lot of places. What I see are flat layers upon flat layers upon flat layers, separated by very thin demarcation where one layer will separate from the other. And they're all flat. They go for untold miles. And in that are buried the trillions of sea creatures, billions of dinosaurs, and then up above that, in later episodes, you have all these giant mammals out here and the 20-foot camels that are buried in volcanic fallout. So the whole thing of what happened to dinosaurs, I mean, I hate to say it. I know it sounds like you're a religious nut, but I'm not saying this from a religious standpoint. They were buried in mud. We have a quarry out in Colorado called the LC2 quarry. And in an area 40 feet wide, and we've dug back about 6 feet, there are no less than a dozen animals. There's several big dinosaurs all mixed up. There are fish and crocodiles. There are carnivores mixed in with the herbivores, so-called, all mixed together. And that's just in one small quarry, and it goes for miles. And you go 5 miles west of there where you can see the strata exposed again. I found a layer of rock, sandstone, gray sandstone, that was 3 feet thick. 1/3 of it was bones. And it went for a half mile till I ran into federal land and I quit collecting. I looked, I could see the bone strata went on, and for no telling how many other dozens of miles. That's all over Colorado. Those are mud layers. And that is the Qumran layers over there in Qumran and the Grand Canyon, all over the world in Switzerland. Same thing. You've got mud layers being laid down. They're soft enough for dinosaurs to walk through and leave a track, and then they're covered by the next layer. Then the bodies get buried, and it's just one giant, in some places, 2-mile-thick layers of mud.
Oh,
That's
wow.
what killed them. It wasn't, now maybe an asteroid hit down at Chicxulub in Mexico and did a lot of damage down there and threw a lot of stuff in the air, but that would wipe out the dinosaurs living at that time. It wouldn't affect those that had died off before or after, but they make it look like the asteroid killed off all these, they say the dinosaurs, like the Permian, the Triassic, is, tens of millions of years before the Cretaceous. Well, and then after that, they have the Tertiary and all that. Well, how could one asteroid cover all those millions of years? It's stupid. I mean, I hate to say that, but that's a dumb position. Maybe an asteroid hit and killed all the animals at that day and time within that week. That's probably so. But that's not what caused the miles of mud to be built up on the earth. And here's another thing. People ask, well, how did all those kangaroos and stuff get over there in Australia? Well, they had to walk over from Ararat. Oh, no, we don't believe in the Bible. Well, how are you going to get them over there? We don't really know. Well, how'd they get to North America? They didn't swim the Bering Strait. They walked over on the Bering Strait when it was dry. Well, okay. Well, where was all the water? Remember the flood? The flood buried all this mud in layers. Well, it's full of water. So it took hundreds of years for all that water to soak back, like a bunch of sponges stacked on top of each other. They don't immediately lose all the water, but after a while, all that water will drain out of the layer of sponges. That's what's happened around the Earth. Well, what it did was the layers, once the mountains rose up and all the water ran back in the ocean, the surface water, then the muddy strata around the world began to drain out and create all these canyons and draws and springs and inland seas and lakes and all that sort of stuff. And the ocean level has risen. Because down here in Texas, I worked on the Clute Mammoth site, and there was actually a clay and sand pit, commercial sand pit, that kept hitting mammoths. So they brought me in, and A&M University came in, did a lot of work. So I came in, and I was part of the deal. And in there, they found a wooden bowl. was hand carved, wasn't supposed to be there. When mammoth hunters didn't use wooden bows. Well, how do you know? Were you there? Apparently they did, and it got lost. Well, the problem with that site, there's all these bones laying around that have been, as far as I can tell, the whole area was a kill site. They kill things and eat them there, or butcher them there. So there's all sorts of deer bones, sloth bones, and other things, and whale ear bones laying around. Well, that area today is 35 feet below the surface of the land. It's 15 feet below sea level. Now, if you drain the ocean level in the Gulf of Texas, Gulf of Mexico, you drain the water 15 feet down, it's going to expose a shoreline that goes 40 miles out into the ocean. So you put all that water back in the flood sediments, and now you've got a lot of dry land out there, so the mammoths come over, people come over to hunt them, and within a few hundred years of the flood, you've got dead mammoth bones laying around everywhere, but the waters begin to rise. And all of a sudden you have a tsunami because the land is still shifting. When the continents broke up, they were still shifting for a while. So, boom, it sets off a big earthquake 100 miles off out in the Gulf, and here comes a huge tsunami. And so it buries all these dead bones that are laying on the surface, buries that wooden bowl before it could float, and it washes all the way up to Crosbyton, and it's so fast that it buries mammoths up here because it can't get away from the rising tsunami. I know that's speculation. I wasn't there, but that's from what I've seen, all the mammoths I've dug in Texas and other places. How are you going to get them buried? Mammoths don't just wade off into the water and drown. They can swim. You've got to have a tsunami of mud catching those things and drowning them so they can't swim. And when they drown and get buried in the mud, 10 or 20 feet deep, that, to me, explains why there's so many of them. I mean, there are thousands of these mammoths buried all over Texas, up into Kansas, Nebraska. There's jillions of them. And all around the coast of Texas, over in Florida, South Carolina, you've just got so many animals over there. The bones are in beautiful shape. They didn't go down to the river and die. That's just not, no. They were buried in tsunamis. What would cause the tsunamis? Well, it's the breaking up the continent still moving. So, to me, it's, I have a lot of constituents who are atheists, and they'll tell you they're atheists or they're antichrist, big deal, and they're evolutionists. And they know what I think about all this stuff, but they can't, what they know what I know, and they really can't say, well, your ideas are goofy, because they know as well as I do those things are buried in flat layers. I've asked them, where'd all this mud come from? Whoa, the Rocky Mountains were dissolving. No, the Rocky Mountains didn't get plumb over here in South Dakota.
No.
And bury these bury these dinosaurs hundreds of feet thick. No. There was a massive, massive moving of water. If you bury Oklahoma, Missouri, Kansas, or Colorado, or Utah, or Israel, or Japan, in that much water, you're going to flood the entire earth. And that's what you see. Now, I know that's hard for some people to accept because they don't want to be religious. Well, I'm sorry, that's, in my opinion, I've seen a lot of this stuff. Been doing it for over 40 years. So I'm not going to apologize for what I've seen. I've seen too much of it. And the asteroid thing, or the bad mammals ate all the dinosaur eggs, that's just so ridiculous. They've just discovered another a pterodactyl site of pterodactyl eggs with babies in them. The little mammals didn't kill all those things. They were buried in flowing mud or falling mud. Same way in France and Argentina. There's so many egg nests out there, thousands of eggs. The mammals didn't go chew all those things up and kill them. That's just dumb. There's just no evidence of that. It's just an excuse to try to stay away from the mud of the flood. And that's my opinion.
Could a big asteroid, hitting the ocean cause that?
Yeah,